Okay, so for Essay 3, Unit 1 of 461, today we're going to be talking about the nervous system and the different divisions of specifically the peripheral nervous system. So I've already separated out the nervous system into the central nervous system, which is just composed of the brain and the spinal cord, and then the peripheral nervous system. We'll be focusing in on this and specifically how this differentiates over into the autonomic, or involuntary portion, and then the somatic, or voluntary portion of the nervous system. And specifically, we'll be also separating this out further into the somatic, that's sensory and motor, and then the autonomic, that's going to be our parasympathetic nervous system, and then our autonomic, our sympathetic, that's going to be our SNS. Parasympathetic is considered our rest and digest. That's important for all of our resting functions and all of that, like smooth muscle functions. And then our sympathetic, that's going to be our fight or flight is what it's known as, but it's also going to help with us freezing and stuff. Perfect. Okay. Where these originate on the spinal cord is that our parasympathetic nervous system is going to come off of our cervical vertebrae and our sacral, so we're going to call it our craniosacral division. And then our sympathetic nervous system is going to come off of our, right here, what I drew, our thoracolumbar region, which we're going to say comes off of the spinal cord from the T1 to L2 regions, or thoracolumbar. Perfect. Now, specifically on the spinal cord, our sympathetic comes from the lateral horn, parasympathetic comes from the gray matter, and then we'll look at our sensory is going to innervate our dorsal horn, and then our motor is going to come from our ventral horn. Perfect. Okay, so with this, we have a few different types of nerves that we'll talk about. We have with our sympathetic, we have spinal nerves. Spinal nerves are going to originate in the lateral horn, and they're going to be composed of, actually all of our autonomic neurons are going to be composed of a pre and post ganglionic neuron, so two neurons for all of our autonomic neurons. But then our parasympathetic is going to have a long preganglionic neuron and a short unmyelinated post, where our sympathetic is going to be opposite. Short pre, long unmyelinated post. Somatic and sensory, they're just going to have one of each. Our sensory is actually going to have a different type of neuron. That's going to be like a pseudo-unipolar, which is kind of cool. But then motor is just going to be one regular neuron, all myelinated. Perfect. So for our spinal nerves, what we're looking at is our short pre, long post, and this is synapsing right here, and what we call the sympathetic chain ganglia. And what this is going to, these spinal nerves, going to a few different things. It can be going to blood vessels, glands, hair, or the skin. Another type of neuron that we have is a sympathetic. And that's going to be the exact same. A short preganglionic long post. And it would be going to any internal organs above the diaphragm. Beautiful. And next one is going to be what we call a splanchnic nerve. And this one's still going to have that short and long, but this one's still synapsing, in the sympathetic chain ganglion. But now this one went past sympathetic chain ganglion, it went through it, but it's going to be synapsing in what we call the collateral ganglia. And it's going to be going to things below the diaphragm. So, stomach, intestines, whereas up here would be like the heart. Beautiful. Last one here that we have is going to be our adrenal medulla pathway. And this one is going to be one long myelinated neuron. And it's going to go straight through our sympathetic chain ganglia and through our collateral ganglia. And it's going to synapse right on our adrenal medulla to release epinephrine. Now, for our parasympathetic nervous system, our neurotransmitter of choice, or what these nerves would be releasing, this is, it would be acetylcholine. And for the sympathetic nervous system, it would be norepinephrine. So it is specific for each neuron of what it would be releasing. So most general sympathetic neurons at their postganglionic neuron release norepinephrine. It depends, like our sweat glands will release acetylcholine at their end, and our adrenal medulla will actually release acetylcholine at its end as well. And then all of our parasympathetic neurons at both ends will release acetylcholine. But all of our sympathetic neurons at their ganglia here, right in the middle, will always release acetylcholine. And that's great because In those areas, we have a receptor there called a nicotinic receptor that responds well to acetylcholine. Now for our receptors, we just have different types of receptors that respond to these neurotransmitters. We have two main ones. For our parasympathetic nervous system, we're going to be looking at things that respond to acetylcholine mainly. We're going to call that cholinergic receptors. For things that respond to epinephrine, we're going to call that adrenergic. And there's some slight differences every once in a while, but for the most part, that's what it is. And under that levels for cholinergic, we're going to include the sub of like alpha muscarinic and nicotinic. And then for adrenergic, we're going to have alpha, beta, and dopamine. Then each organ is going to have nicotinic or beta, alpha, muscarinic type receptors that will respond to either a sympathetic or parasympathetic response, and your body will react accordingly. It's kind of fascinating. Then, for example, we'll just go through one action. Let's say the heart. Draw out a little heart. So if I was having a sympathetic response, I'd be releasing norepinephrine from my postganglionic neuron, and it would be reacting to one of my adrenergic receptors. In this case, it's going to be one of the specific beta ones. It's going to be a beta 1 receptor. And that result would be an increased heart rate. Then on the other side, if I had a parasympathetic response, I'd release acetylcholine, and that would bind to a muscarinic receptor. In this case, we have two, either M2 or M4, and that would initiate a parasympathetic response of decreased heart rate. That's what would happen. Underneath these subdivisions, we have evens and odds. So we have 5 muscarinic receptors, 2 nicotinic, 2 alpha, 3 beta, and then 2 dopamine. What's cool is that ones are usually always excitatory, so increasing a sympathetic response, and then evens are inhibitory or causing a parasympathetic response, and that always changes because inhibitory can mean a couple different things. Like if you're inhibiting a muscle, it looks different, right? But if you're exciting a muscle, it's contracting. So we classify some of those differently, but that's what that looks like. And that's what happened. So that's going to be a little brief overview of our ANS for this week. That was a quick video, but I hope that made sense and kind of just gave you a little overview of everything. And we'll see you next week. Bye.